Have you ever reached a moment where nothing dramatic happened? No accident, no argument, no big announcement. Yet something inside you shifted forever. This is a story of Ryan Parker, a man whose entire life changed not because of a loud choice, but because of one quiet decision no one else even noticed. Ryan Parker was 34 years old, living in a small rented apartment on the edge of a busy American city. From the outside, his life looked perfectly fine. He had a steady job, a roof over his head, and food in the fridge. But inside, Ryan felt an exhaustion that sleep could never fix. Every morning, his alarm would scream at 6:30 a.m. And every morning, he would hit snooze, again and again, until pure panic finally forced him out of bed. He rushed through everything. He rushed to work, rushed through conversations, rushed through his dinner, only to rush back to the endless scroll on his phone. And every single night, lying there in bed, Ryan felt the same heavy thought pressed down on his chest. Is this really my life? He wasn't lazy, he wasn't unintelligent, he wasn't careless, but he felt completely and utterly stuck. The bills came and went like clockwork. His dreams, however, stayed untouched, collecting dust in the back of his mind. The days just blurred together, a long, indistinct haze of obligation. Ryan would often tell himself the same comforting lies. I'll change when things calm down. I'll finally focus when life slows down. I'll work on myself when I have more time. But life never slowed down. It only seemed to get faster, louder, and more demanding. You see, Ryan used to have dreams, big ones. He once dreamed of being a writer, creating worlds with words. He imagined traveling, seeing places he'd only read about in books. He wanted to learn how to play the guitar, feeling the vibration of the strings under his fingertips. Those weren't just vague wishes, they were parts of who he was. But slowly, over time, the noise of daily life had drowned them out. The demands of his job, the pressure to pay rent, the constant feeling of being just one step behind, it all chipped away at his aspirations. His dreams became like old photographs, faded and tucked away in a drawer. He'd occasionally stumble upon them, feel a pang of nostalgia, and then quickly shut the drawer, telling himself he had more important things to worry about. One Tuesday evening, something different happened. It wasn't a good day or a bad day. It was just another Tuesday. Ryan was sitting on his worn-out couch, scrolling through social media. He saw pictures of an old college friend's trip to Italy. He saw another friend celebrating a promotion. He saw a cousin showing off a newly learned song on the guitar. And in that moment, it wasn't jealousy he felt. It was a profound, hollow emptiness. He realized all the things he was watching others do were the very things he once promised himself he would do. The someday he was always waiting for was happening right now, just for other people. He looked around his small apartment. The overflowing laundry basket, the stack of unopened mail, the half-eaten takeout container on the coffee table. This wasn't a temporary stop. This had become his life. He wasn't just waiting for a better future. He was actively building a mediocre present, day after day. And that was the quiet moment. No thunder, no lightning, just a silent, gut-wrenching realization. If he didn't do something, nothing would ever change. Later was a lie. When a halftime was a fantasy, the perfect moment would never arrive. So, he made a decision. A very small one. He stood up, walked over to his cluttered desk, and pulled out a dusty notebook and a pen. He didn't write a grand plan to change his entire life. He just wrote down one thing, one tiny, achievable thing he could do the next day that was purely for him, for one of those old, forgotten dreams. He wrote, "Write for 15 minutes. That was it. That was the spark. Not a resolution to quit his job or move across the country, just a promise to give himself 15 minutes. The next morning, his alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. He still wanted to hit snooze. The old habit was strong, but this time the image of that notebook on his desk was stronger. He got up. He didn't check his phone. He didn't turn on the news. He just sat down with his notebook, and for the first time in years, he wrote. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was his. For those 15 minutes, he wasn't just surviving, he was creating. That one small act started a chain reaction. The 15 minutes of writing gave him a sliver of control, a tiny sense of accomplishment that carried him through the day. He felt a little lighter. The next day, he did it again, and the day after that. Soon, he started adding other small things. A 10-minute walk during his lunch break without his phone, spending 20 minutes on a Saturday learning a single chord on a borrowed guitar. These weren't massive, life-altering changes. They were tiny shifts in his daily routine. Battotsumi, kasanerarete ikuto, these small actions began to reshape his entire reality. He was no longer just a passive observer of his life. He was an active participant. Months went by. Ryan was still in the same apartment, still at the same job. From the outside, nothing had changed. But on the inside, everything was different. The heavy weight on his chest was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. The future was no longer a source of anxiety, but a canvas of possibility. The story of Ryan Parker isn't about some miracle. It's about the incredible power of a single, quiet decision. It is a reminder that we do need to wait for a dramatic event to change our lives. We don't need permission. We don't need more time or more money. We just need to decide that someday is today. So if you feel stuck, if you feel like you're just rushing through the days, ask yourself, what is the one small thing you can do for yourself right now? Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now. Because real change doesn't start with a leap. It starts with a single step. We all have dreams, right? Not the childish ones, but the real ones. Maybe you wanted to start your own business. Maybe you dreamed of writing a book, or just living with a sense of freedom. Ryan had those dreams too, but somewhere along the line, something changed. Responsibility replaced courage. Fear took over from focus, and the comfort of the familiar replaced the discomfort of growth. At work, Ryan did just enough to get by, but never enough to feel that spark of pride. At home, he'd scroll through his phone, watching other people live the life he secretly craved for himself. And the worst part, the part that really stung, he knew he was capable of more. That quiet knowledge was a constant ache, a feeling more painful than any failure. One night after another long, draining day, Ryan looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. His eyes looked tired, older than they should. They looked empty. He whispered to his own reflection, I'm wasting my life, and I don't even know how to stop. You'd think the big change, the breaking point, would come with some huge, dramatic event. But for Ryan, it didn't. It arrived quietly, on a completely ordinary Tuesday evening. He was at the grocery store after work, standing in line, watching the cashier scan his items. $84.27, she said, her voice flat. Ryan inserted his card. Declined. A hot flush of embarrassment crept up his neck. He tried again. Declined. He could feel the impatience of the people in line behind him. The cashier politely avoided his gaze. So, he started taking things out of his cart, one by one. He tried the cart again. Approved. Walking back to his car with fewer groceries and a heavy feeling in his chest, something inside Ryan finally cracked. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the feeling of being completely out of control. Sitting there, with his hands gripping the steering wheel, he felt tears burning behind his eyes. But he didn't cry. Instead, a single, painful thought echoed in his mind. Nothing in my life will change unless I change it. He realized no one was coming to rescue him. There was no magical perfect moment on the horizon. No motivation fairy was going to show up and sprinkle him with inspiration. It was all on him. And that night, sitting alone in his car in that grocery store parking lot, Ryan made one simple decision. It didn't feel revolutionary. It wasn't loud or dramatic. But this quiet decision was about to change everything. What was he? Ryan decided to take full and complete responsibility for one thing. His focus. Not his motivation, which comes and goes. Not his goals, which can feel overwhelming. Not the outcomes, which are often out of our hands. Just his focus, he told himself. I can't control everything, but I can control what I give my attention to. This is the hidden key so many of us miss. We wait for motivation to strike before we act. We set huge goals and then feel defeated when we don't hit them immediately. But what if we shifted our attention to the one thing we can control? Right here, right now. Our focus. Think about your day. How much of it is spent on things that drain you versus things that build you? How much time is lost to mindless scrolling, worrying about things you can't change, or replaying past mistakes? What if, like Ryan, you decided to reclaim that attention? Ryan started small. He decided that for the first hour of his day, he would not look at his phone. Instead, he would focus on reading one chapter of a book related to his old dream of writing. Just one chapter. During his lunch break, instead of scrolling, he'd go for a walk and focus on a single problem he wanted to solve for his business idea. Just for 15 minutes. He started to treat his attention like it was his most valuable currency. Because it is slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to shift. The small pockets of focus time started to add up. He felt a little more in control. A little less empty. The progress wasn't a giant leap. It was a series of small, deliberate steps. He was no longer waiting for the life he wanted to happen to him. He was actively building it, one moment of focused attention at a time. This isn't about hustle culture or burning yourself out. It's the opposite. It's about being intentional. It's about choosing where your energy flows. Your attention is the rudder of your life. Wherever it points, you will go. If it points at distractions and fears, that's where you'll stay. But if you point it, even for a few minutes a day, toward growth, learning, and what truly matters to you, your entire life will begin to steer in that direction. So, here's my question for you. Where is your focus right now? And where do you want it to be? You don't need a dramatic breaking point. You just need to make a quiet decision, right now, to take back control of your attention. Start small. Pick one thing, and watch how everything begins to change. Have you ever felt lost? Scrolling endlessly, waiting for something to change? This is a story about Ryan, a man who felt just like that. He was stuck in a cycle of distraction, his dreams fading with every swipe of his phone. He wasn't living, he was just reacting. His life was a blur of notifications, meaningless content, and a constant feeling of being behind. He was drowning in digital noise, and he knew something had to give. He felt a deep sense of unease, a quiet desperation that many of us know all too well. The spark he once had was gone, replaced by a dull ache of unfulfilled potential. He was waiting for a sign, for a lightning bolt of motivation, but it never came. So he made one simple rule for himself. Just one. Every single day, before his hand could even touch his phone, it would spend 30 minutes on one single, meaningful action. No excuses. He wasn't aiming for perfection, just for presence. That was the entire plan. There was no complicated vision board, no grand 10-year life plan, no massive promise he was bound to break. It was just one quiet, personal decision made in the silence of his own mind. He decided that the first 30 minutes of his day would belong to him, not to the world screaming for his attention through a screen. It was a tiny act of rebellion against the chaos that had consumed him. As soon as Ryan woke up, his hand shot out instinctively, reaching for his phone on the nightstand. But he stopped. His hand just hovered there, trembling slightly. His mind immediately started to rebel, screaming at him with familiar excuses. "Just 5 minutes," it whispered. "You've earned a little break. This is silly. It won't even matter in the long run." The pull was immense, a physical craving for that digital hit. But for the first time, Ryan didn't give in. He pulled his hand back, sat up in bed, and took a deep breath. He ignored the whining voice in his head and made a different choice. He reached for a dusty notebook he hadn't touched in years. He opened it to a blank page, pen in hand, with absolutely no idea what to write. The pressure to do something profound felt heavy. So, he just wrote one simple sentence. "Today, I choose to focus." That was it. Those 30 minutes crawled by. It felt like an eternity. But as the clock ticked on, something strange and unexpected began to happen. Ryan felt present, genuinely present. Perhaps for the first time in a very long time, the usual mental fog started to clear, replaced by a quiet clarity he hadn't experienced in ages. That day at work, the change was subtle, but noticeable. He started seeing things he usually ignored, the way a coworker's face lit up when talking about their weekend, the intricate details of a project he'd been rushing through. He was actually working, not just looking for the next distraction, the next escape from the task at hand. Nothing magical or dramatic happened. He didn't get a sudden promotion or win the lottery, but something deep inside him felt calmer. The constant, low-level anxiety that had become his normal state began to recede, replaced by a gentle sense of control. Days turned into weeks, and this new habit started to take root. Of course, it wasn't a perfect journey. There were mornings when Ryan failed, when the allure of the phone was too strong and he found himself scrolling before he even realized it. There were mornings he only managed 10 minutes, but he never gave up on the rule entirely. 30 minutes. One task. No phone. He started using that time to rediscover parts of himself he thought were long gone. He began reading books again, feeling the weight of the pages in his hands. He started writing again, filling that old notebook with thoughts, ideas, and reflections. He even started learning a new language online, his mind feeling sharper and more engaged than it had in years. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, his confidence began to return. And here's the crucial part. It wasn't because his external life had suddenly improved. It was because he was improving. He was proving to himself every single morning that he was capable of keeping a promise. This small act of discipline was like a muscle, and with each passing day, it grew stronger. And then other people started to notice. "You seem different," a coworker commented one afternoon. "More focused, more present." Ryan just smiled and felt it too, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. He was consciously choosing how to show up each day. He was no longer a passenger. He was taking the wheel. 3 months later, if you looked at Ryan's life from the outside, it looked pretty much the same. He still had the same job. He lived in the same apartment, in the same city, but on the inside, everything was different. His mind was no longer a chaotic storm of worries and distractions. That newfound focus and discipline started to ripple out into every other area of his life. He started tracking his spending and began to save money, something he'd always told himself he was bad at. He started actually planning for his future, not with anxiety, but with a sense of quiet optimism. Most importantly, he started to believe in himself again. That nagging voice of self-doubt was still there, but it was much quieter now. He traced it all back to that one simple decision: to protect the first 30 minutes of his day. That one small act of protecting his focus created discipline. That discipline built a foundation of self-trust and confidence. And that newfound confidence started to unlock opportunities he had never even seen before. He was building his future, one quiet morning at a time. The change wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a steady, internal shift that was completely rearranging his world from the inside out. One evening, Ryan was sitting alone, journaling, when he had a powerful realization. The biggest, most life-altering changes don't arrive with a thunderclap. They don't announce themselves with fireworks and a marching band. They whisper. They show up in the quiet, consistent choices we make every single day when no one is watching. Ryan's life didn't change overnight, but it did change forever. And it wasn't because he waited for motivation to strike him like lightning. It was because he made one quiet decision and then honored it, day after day after day. And maybe, as you're listening to this story right now, you're standing at your own invisible turning point. It's not a dramatic crossroads. No one will applaud you for the choice you make. No one else might even notice it at first. But that small, quiet decision to read one page, to write one sentence, to take one deep breath before checking your phone, it might just be the decision that saves your future. Because sometimes, one small decision, made consistently and quietly, is the only thing you need to change everything. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear which part of Ryan's journey hit you the hardest. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.